just full of information that's very
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Compliance for All's live webinar on ATC radar approach control. My name is Michael, and I'll be your host for today's session. And on behalf of the Compliance for All team, I'd like to thank you all for being part of today's session. Today's webinar is being presented by Mr. Stephen Albania. Before we start off today's session, a few words about our speaker, Stephen. He's had over 30 years of experience with the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, and he's also a certified air traffic controller at an airport traffic control tower and a radar approach control and an en route ATC center. And he's also led the development and deployment of the National Traffic Flow Management System. And he's also worked as a technical research program manager for multiple advanced ATC capabilities, and also he's a FAA HQ ATC procedure specialist. And his expertise includes aviation committee staff for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, ATC subject matter expert for ASAP Census Corporation, and also currently Stephen is the owner of Air Traffic Consulting Systems LLC. And we are honored to have Stephen with us today to present today's webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start off today's session, I'd like to quickly inform you of the program outline. This webinar is for a 90-minute duration. First, Stephen will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas he would cover and then share with you his presentation. And also, we'd like to inform all our participants today that once part of today's teleconference, you're being placed on mute and would remain so until the Q&A begins. We have a couple of minutes at the end for your question and answers, but if you do come up with questions during the session, please post your questions in the Q&A panel or the chat messenger. And for any reason, ladies and gentlemen, if you do get logged out of today's session, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we're all ready, I request Stephen to take it from you. Stephen?
Thank you, Michael. Am I coming in okay?
Absolutely, Stephen.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the webinar.
So now that we know that time period is
Michael's done a good job of going through this, so I'll just skip this section and get on to the objective. And the objective here is this. And we've all heard the expressions about there are things that you know, things you know you don't know, things you don't know you know, and things you don't know you don't know, which is the one that is the most problematic. So that's why I want to focus on teaching people or exposing people to things that they really don't know about the ATC system. The question is, well, why do I want to do that? Okay, well, the first thing is I'm assuming that everybody who's here has a professional interest in understanding the ATC system, and to a level that is fairly significant and at least can appreciate, has a sense of appreciation for what the system really is, beyond your curiosity or an interest in it. That's why that's supposed to do that.
But most of the industry standards that we're going to go over will still not be written in the law. It's not.
And one of the things that the reason why I'm doing this is the system's like an iceberg. People see it out there and say, oh, it's beautiful and it works well, all this type of thing. But most of the complexity and most of the messiness, and also most of the beauty of the system lies beneath the waterline and is not obvious to an observer. You can ask questions, you can do this, you can do that, but there's still many parts of the system that most people don't know how it works. And I experienced that when I was the subject matter expert. People would be asking me questions, we'll be talking about something, and something would come up, and I would be curious, well, why aren't they asking me about this? So I would offer the information, and I began to realize they didn't know to ask the question. So they didn't, the thought to asking the question never occurred to them. So that's when I began to get on a mission here to kind of help people understand those things that they don't know. And the reason why it's important is that an incomplete understanding of the operational problems, and that's what I'm focusing on too, is not so much the technology or the mechanics or the logistics, but the operational problems. And if you don't understand those well, if you don't have a full appreciation for the messiness of the system and its elegance, that can lead to flawed technical solutions that you offer the agency or in the development of new technologies. They're flawed because they've simplified the problem and really haven't addressed the hard stuff, the messy stuff that makes things so much more complicated. But if you don't do that, or if you do that, then what you produce is something that is limited and insufficient utility to the users. They're saying, well, okay, that's fine what you're doing, but I need to do more. I need you to help me with the hard part. And once they begin to get the sense that you have left out the hard part, then they lose confidence in you as a developer. And at that point, that's kind of like strike three. And at that point, it's very difficult to regain the confidence of the customer. So I want to kind of help people understand that complexity so they can be more credible, have a better understanding and more appreciation for what the controllers or the users of the system are actually facing. And today's, we're going to discuss, the terminal radar approach control, the TRACON operations. A few weeks ago, we had one, the initial webinar on some of the basic concepts of ATC that underlie all this. So we've kind of covered a lot of that. I'll start from there and work on now focusing in on a particular facility type. So people who didn't attend that, it shouldn't be a real loss, but they make it a little more difficult now to kind of follow what I'm saying. Not really difficult, but just a little more difficult. Anyway, so let's get on with that. And before we do, though, I just wanted to, this time I put this in all my briefings just to make sure I don't get sued by somebody. This is not, an official proposal or concept or direction to anybody.
Which means we're going to have to get IT.
The views I present here are my own, based upon all these years of experience and observation and just interaction with all these people. But I don't represent anybody. I don't represent the government, business associations, or unions, or anybody else. The next thing I want to say is what I'm going to be going through here is not to show you how they run traffic at Chicago or Los Angeles or a particular airport. Every airport is completely unique. It's very much, they're all the same, but yet they're all very, very unique. So if you need that kind of information, it's best to go there, talk to people who work there, and get that level of detail and currency. What I'm going through here is a sense to kind of show you what the context is, what they're facing, that applies to all facilities, not just a particular facility someplace. And the last thing is, here is I use a lot of videos and a lot of getting here to try to get the idea across. And I use them because I find them to be the most useful for what I need, as far as getting people to understand. And it shouldn't be construed as a kind of official endorsement of them. There's many, many of these out there. These are the ones that I've come across that I find most useful. So I use them for my own personal preferences. I have talked to them, get their approval, but I'm not being paid or anything else by anybody else. So don't take these as endorsements, just suggestions or thoughts on my part. Okay, let's get started. Okay, to rehash a little bit, like I said last time, there's these 5 facility types in the ATC system. The flight service stations, the towers, TRACON centers, and the command center. The first one, the flight service stations, which used to be at all these airports. That's where pilots got all their services and, filed their flight plans, got their weather, type of thing. That's now done basically online, and it also still is the center of the facility efforts to do search and rescue if that's ever required. But it's now done online primarily, and it is not a control facility. It's an information service. It's many, many services. In fact, it does more for pilots than ATC does. But it does not control the airplanes. So basically, we can just kind of eliminate that one as being part of the 4, which leaves these 4. Okay, and first one is the tower, which we all have seen before, the big tall structure there, and that provides a rolling flow of traffic between the runways and the parking areas, back and forth. Departures going out, arrivals coming in. Okay, the next one down would be the TRACON, which we're talking about today. This one is right here, the base of the tower in this particular configuration. Many airports, with technology nowadays, it doesn't really matter where they are. They used to be right there beneath the tower cab because of technology. But then as you could do with more data, they moved them down here, then off the airport, and now they could be almost anywhere. But what these facilities do are provide separation and sequencing services at or about or near the major airport, or airport or airports. So it's the close-in, detailed separation and sequencing of traffic near major areas. The next one down is the centers, of which there are 20, and this is basically the
Hello everyone. Welcome to Compliance for All live webinar on accounting and tax procedures to maximize your deductions and minimize problems with the IRS. My name is Johnson and I'm going to be a host for today's session. On behalf of the Compliance for All team, I would like to thank you for being a part of today's event. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Ruben Rubinson. Mr. Rubinson is a CPA and has been licensed since 1979. He has received his MBA from New York University in 1977. He has been preparing tax returns for over 40 years and will be preparing the 2013 tax returns for approximately 150 individuals, 50 businesses, and 7 nonprofits. He currently acts as a Chief Financial Officer for 7 companies and consults with numerous others. He previously worked as a CFO or VP Finance for 3 publicly traded startup companies and has been responsible for accounting, IT, and human resources departments, developed policies and procedures, performed in-house legal reviews, and filed governmental reports and returns. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Mr. Rubinson with us to present today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outline for this training session. This webinar is for 90 minutes duration. First, Mr. Rubinson will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that would be covered, and he would then share with you his presentation. We'd like to inform all our participants once part of the teleconference have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins towards the end of the webinar. We also request all to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. If for any reason you are logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we are ready to start, I request Mr. Rubinson to take it from here. Mr. Rubinson?
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Johnson, and welcome everyone. And actually, one change to what Johnson said. I know you don't want to listen to me talking for over an hour straight, so I'm going to be pausing periodically to take questions after each section in that. So if you'd like to ask questions as we go along each section, please feel free to send them in, and then at the end we'll have an open question and answer as well. So let's start. Here's my course outline, and let's see. So you can see we're going to go over the introductory information and personal, which we've done, look at internal control and policies, procedures for your accounting system, and going down to minimizing your tax liability. The purpose of this webinar is to share with you the system I have developed over the last 30-plus years to help small businesses to, 1, properly prepare their books and records, 2, ensure they're recording all of their expenses and other deductions, and 3, accumulate the documentation necessary to verify the information for the IRS and, maybe in the future, assist in an audit of your financial statements. Let me emphasize at the outset that I purposely use the word procedures in the title of my webinar. I'd like everyone on the call to ask themselves, do I have a set of policies and procedures for my business and my accounting department? For those of you that have answered yes, ask yourself, how often do I check to see that these policies and procedures are being followed? As we spend the next hour and a half together, I would like you to compare the information I am presenting to what you are currently doing in your business. As I mentioned earlier, I have been a licensed CPA since 1979. I would also note that in addition to being a CPA and CFO, I'm a computer programmer, and I have worked as the head of an IT department for 5 years. You might be asking yourself, what does computer programming and understanding technology have to do with being a CPA or CFO, or with creating policies and procedures? Well, first, most companies create and maintain their books and records using a software program nowadays, rather than by hand or using spreadsheets. Next, there's a perfectionism, a results-oriented questioning process with programming that is very helpful in developing policies and procedures. And lastly, there's a step-by-step logical thought process that goes into computer programming, which assists in analyzing a company's procedures. So everything we're talking about is logical, step-by-step, kind of like a flow chart. I'd like to start by defining what internal control is. According to the according to the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, commonly known as COSO, internal control is broadly defined as a process effected by an entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives in the following categories. 1, effectiveness and efficiency of operations. 2, reliability of financial reporting. And 3, compliance with applicable laws and regulations. In this webinar, we are going to touch on the effectiveness of your operations and concentrate on the reliability of your financial reports and compliance with IRS regulations. Okay, how do we... Next, let's look at the policies and procedures that run your accounting department. Here are some of the basic policies you need to follow. Access to accounting information restricted. Committing the company to expenditures controlled. Authority to authorize transactions limited. Job descriptions are maintained for all employees and include their duties and responsibilities. Segregation of duties. Procedures developed to support these policies are tested. And financial procedures are reviewed on a regular basis. So now let's look at some of the specific procedures you can implement in connection with this. Accounting software access. The first decision you need to make is which software program or packages you are going to use. For many smaller companies, an all-in-one software package such as QuickBooks or Peachtree is sufficient. However, if you are in a specialized industry, it may be better to use 2 separate software programs. You need to first look for the software program that will best handle your industry, your business line. If the specialized program has a good accounting program included, or which can be integrated with it, great. If not, you can always use 2 different systems. As an example, I had a client that was an auto repair shop. He needed a specialized program that allowed him to track parts and prepare estimates for customers. It also generated bills with all of the detail he needed and recorded the customer payments, tracking accounts receivable. In his situation, we generated a report from the specialized software program on a weekly basis and input a 6-line journal entry into the main accounting software program. Who has access? In his case, the specialized software program was accessible by all of his employees. However, the accounting software was located on a different computer where only the owner and the accounting department had access. In most cases, you'll have one software package that handles everything for you. In this case, you'll need to set up a system of passwords and access so that each user only has access to the information they need to know. You also want to store the file on a secure computer and back it up on a regular basis. And you need to make sure users do not share their login information with other employees and that passwords are changed on a regular basis. As an aside, when you terminate an employee, in addition to the normal policy of retrieving their keys and company equipment, you also need to...
Hello everyone, welcome to Compliance for All live webinar on 1019 and W9 update, complying with IRS information reporting. My name is Ron and I'm going to be a host for today's session. On behalf of the Compliance for All team, I'd like to thank you all.
Hello everyone, welcome to Compliance for All
Today's webinar
live webinar on accounting and tax procedures to maximize your deductions and minimize problems with the IRS.
Is a CPA and
My name is Johnson and I'm going to be a host for today's session. On behalf of the Compliance for All team, I would like to thank you for being a part of today's event. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Rubinson. Mr. Rubinson is a CPA and has been licensed since 1979. He has received his MBA from New York University in 1977. He has been preparing tax returns for over 40 years and will be preparing the 2013 tax returns for approximately 150 individuals, 50 businesses, and 7 nonprofits. He currently acts as a Chief Financial Officer for 7 companies and consults with numerous others. He previously worked as a CFO or VP Finance for 3 publicly traded startup companies and has been responsible for accounting, IT, and human resources departments, develop policies and procedures, perform in-house legal reviews, and file governmental reports and returns. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Mr. Rubinson with us to present today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outline for this training session. This webinar is for 90 minutes duration. First, Mr. Rubinson will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that would be covered, and he will then share with you his presentation. We'd like to inform all our participants once part of the teleconference have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins towards the end of the webinar. We also request all to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered.
Welcome, everyone.
If for any reason you are logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we are ready to start, I request Mr. Rubinson to take it from here.
Chat box anytime you want to.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Johnson, and welcome everyone. And actually, one change to what Johnson said. I know you don't want to listen to me talking for over an hour straight,
while we're talking,
so
and perhaps
I'm going to be
the topics
pausing
of question are
to
germane to the specific delivery at that moment, and I'll be happy to try to answer them at that time.
Ask questions
Most of the questions will probably follow at the end.
Feel free to send them in.
So your agenda for today is to take a look at the tax revenue issues related to this type of reporting and disclosure, and try to help you build some best practices to help you avoid penalties and reduce your risks of
so you can see we're going to go over the introductory information
CP 2100s or B notices.
Look at internal control and policies.
We'll take a quick look through the issues and try to make sure you're up to date.
Minimizing your tax
we'll
liability.
take it from there.
The purpose of this webinar
issues that the IRS has are reported in something called the tax gap on the IRS website, and you're welcome to Google that at any time.
Properly
Just
prepare
simply
their books and records.
go into the irs.gov website and
ensure they're
use a search
recording
box
all
at
of
the
their
top right corner.
and
Type
other
in
deductions.
tax gap. This is the most
And
recent
3,
information they have
accumulate
available,
documentation
2001 and
necessary
2006.
to verify
And we wanted to
the
point out some
information for the
information
IRS
to you,
and
just to keep things
maybe
in
the future,
perspective with regard
assist
to
in
the
an
total
audit
tax
of your
collections
financial
per year. It's about 2.6,
Let me emphasize at the
2.7,
outset
maybe
that I purposely
$2.8
used
billion
the word
now.
procedures
There's a tax gap of
in the
about
title of my
$450
webinar.
million.
I'd like everyone on the call to ask themselves,
Voluntary
do I have a
compliance takes
set
care of about
of
17%
policies and
of that,
procedures
which leaves about
for my business
$400 million
and my accounting department?
unaccounted for that
for those
has to
of
be
you
chased
that have answered
down.
yes,
A lot of that has to do with underreporting.
How often do I check?
Some of that has to do with business
income.
income. 122 million starts to focus
in
on
the
our
next
topic
hour
today
and a half together,
with regard to 1099
I would like you to compare
reporting.
the information I am presenting.
Finally, small corporations represent about 19 million of this tax, and individual income tax is about 36 million. So
as
what
I
we're trying to
earlier,
do
is
isolate the issues that would
I would
be
also note that
applicable to 1099 reporting, and we've done that for you. There are a couple $100 million worth of issues that the government's trying to make you responsible for reporting to them, so they can chase it down and get it collected.
Have to do with being
the
a CPA
Patient Protection and
or
Affordable Care Act
or with creating policies and procedures.
Did eliminate the corporate exemption for 1099 reporting, but then when everybody quote-unquote read it to find out what was in it, the President said, oh, that was in there? Oh, no, we need to take that back out. So what we have in the way of a corporate exemption for 1099 reporting still exists. It was only contemplated to be removed for a brief moment, and then it was put back.
Thought process that goes into
corporate
computer
exemption
programming
does not apply to
which
a couple of
in
types
analyzing
of
a company's procedures.
and we'll get to that in
so
just a little bit.
We're talking
but for the
about
most part,
is
corporate
logical,
exemption is still
step-by-step, kind of like a flow chart.
Always. Increased penalties did occur.
I'd like to start by defining what internal control is.
The time
according
under
to
which
the Treadway
you
Commission,
pay
or
report,
according to the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations
has something
of the
to do
Treadway
with the size of the
Commission,
penalty.
commonly known
so you
as
can
POSO.
see the old fine in the lonely box
internal
in the
control
column 2 there, $50.
Broadly defined as
the new
a process.
fine structure is if you get caught up within 30 days of the
deadline,
management, let's see, are we still in that 30-day pocket? Yes, we are.
To provide reasonable
your penalty could be $30 per late filing.
In the following categories.
The maximum penalties for companies that are classified as large businesses is $250,000 a year. Small businesses have
reliability of financial
receipts
reporting.
or sales under, I believe it's $5 million. And so they're
Compliance
classified as small businesses, and their
laws and
cap
regulations.
is $75,000.
In this
If
webinar,
you're more than 30 days out, but get things
on
taken care of by August 1st, of course, you see it jump to $60,
of your operation
and the caps rise.
And concentrate
Willful disregard
on
penalty,
the reliability
after August 1st, the penalty rises to $100 per document.
And
per document. Now, that's per 1099, folks.
With IRS
and the caps,
regulations.
look at those, $1.5 million versus $500,000. Willful disregard penalty, if you simply do not file your information returns, there's a $250 fine per return in addition to the late filing fee above.
Next, let's look at the policies and procedures that run your accounting department.
And then there's some additional problems, failure to furnish the statements to the payee. Now you're going to double the fine.
Restricted.
So there's a fine for not filing with the IRS, and there's a fine for not filing these with the payee. So just 2 times everything
Authority
above.
to authorize transactions, limited.
Failure to file electronically when required, $100 per item.
Are maintained
and
for
fraudulent
all
filings, $5,000 plus
duties and
potential damages payable to the person defrauded.
Segregation
I actually experienced the flip of this in a prior year. I think it was last year.
Developed to support these
the Canadian Revenue Group sent a document to the IRS that said I was paid thousands and thousands of dollars from somebody that doesn't even exist in Canada. And the IRS then added that to my tax return, sent me a notice of penalties and tax due, and if that had been somebody in the United States that had filed that document and they could track back on them, I would be able to pursue them for defrauding me or attempting to do so. And they would have had the $5,000 fine plus the fraud charges.
All-in-one software package.
As it turns out, it was a Canadian firm that doesn't exist, and the Canadian Revenue can't find them, the IRS can't find them, and I'm thinking, okay, that looks like money laundering. I wonder what's going on there. So I requested the IRS pursue that. Of course, they have no obligation to report back to me, and I have no idea whether they did.
If the specialized program has a good accounting program included, or which can be integrated with it,
coming into effect versus being released is a bit different, but it's going into effect in 2014. The new law was released in 2012.
I had a client that was an auto repair shop.
The Foreign Account Tax
Compliance Act. That allowed him to track parts and prepare estimates for customers.
forms,
it also generated
disclosure forms that we put out to our payees.
And recorded the customer
W-9 is one of those disclosure forms, and it was effective.
In his
so
situation,
we want you to know about that, and we'll take a look at that effect here in just a couple of minutes.
Software program
Basically,
on a weekly basis.
It is an attempt to create transparency on foreign accounts
into the main accounting
where
software program.
a U.S. taxpayer, also known as a U.S. resident or a U.S. non-resident,
in his case, the specialized software program was accessible by all of his employees.
Offshore and is attempting
However,
to hide
the accounting
assets
software was
and the
located
income
on
those
computer,
assets in
where
those
only the
offshore
owner
accounts.
and the accounting
That
department
game
had
is
access.
pretty much ending.
In most cases,
UBS
you'll have one software package that
$700+
handles everything for
million of fines because they were actually sending people into the United States to.
In this case, you'll need to set up a system of passwords and access so that each user only has access to the information they need to know. You also want to store the file on a secure computer and back it up on a regular basis. And you need to make sure users do not share their login information with other employees and that passwords are changed on a regular basis. As an aside, when you terminate an employee, in addition to the normal policy of retrieving their keys and company equipment, you also need